Business and Biodiversity 101. This is the first, as I said, in the inaugural webinar for the Discovery Track. And as I said, you're all very welcome. My name is Lucy Gaffney, and I'm the Executive Director of Business for Biodiversity Ireland. And we are just wanted to start off with this basics webinar to kind of get you up to speed on what the current thinking is now around business and biodiversity and the direction of travel. So first of all, we'll start with a little bit of housekeeping. Please use the Q&A function if you have any questions, pop them in as we go through the presentation, and then we will have a bit of time at the end to address some of those questions. The session is being recorded, and this recording and the slide deck will be available in the resources section and the webinar section of the members dashboard in due course. So if you haven't registered a free account on the platform, please do so you can access all of these different resources for you. So a little bit about the platform. What we're really here for is for mainstreaming biodiversity concepts, knowledge sharing, advice learning, active learning, peer learning, sharing ideas, and capacity building largely. And what we're not is a place for all things sustainability, although you will find that's quite a lot of overlap. We're also not a government top-down initiative for passive learning, and we're not a marketplace for sustainability or biodiversity solutions. So just to give you a little tip on that. Now, next, the aims of the platform, we're just going to talk very quickly to that. The main purpose of the platform is about encouraging and empowering Irish businesses like you to assess and understand how your business impacts and depends on nature through your direct operations, but also through your value chain, with a view to managing risk and availing of associated opportunities. Now, the main work within the platform is to support the implementation of our 4th National Biodiversity Action Plan, which was released back in January. And we're aligned with that global goal for nature, which I'll touch on again, which is to halt biodiversity loss, to see no net loss of nature by 2030 from a 2020 baseline, and to see a net gain or an increase in nature from 2030, with hopefully full recovery by 2050. So that is the mandate of the platform. Our mission is to empower you and your business to incorporate nature into decision making. Now, our funding has come from the government. We've had 3 years of seed funding from the Department of Housing, Local Government and Heritage through the National Parks and Wildlife Service, and from the Department of Agriculture. And we have received expertise and administrative support from Natural Capital Ireland, Business in the Community, and the National Biodiversity Data Centre over the last 3 years or so. And they continue to be big supporters of the work of the platform, even though we've now spun out into our own non-profit organisation. So I'm going to just start first with a few definitions. We all kind of know what nature is, but for the purposes of, compliance with CSRD or navigating through something like the Task Force on Nature-Related Financial Disclosures, or TNFD, it's important to know when we talk about nature what exactly we're talking about. So nature refers to obviously the natural world, with an emphasis on the diversity of living organisms, including people, and our interactions among ourselves and with the environment. So nature can be understood through a construct of 4 realms, which are interconnected and interdependent. And these realms are land, ocean, freshwater and atmosphere. And of course, you can see society right in the middle of that. Biodiversity refers to the variety of living things in the different environments, including the diversity of ecosystems that we have, differences between species, the differences within species. And if you think of environmental assets as nature's capital, so we have things like forests, wetlands, and healthy soils, the flows that come from those healthy ecosystems are the benefits that we receive from nature. And this can include clean water filtration by wetlands, the pollination of crops by bees, butterflies and other pollinating insects, or flood protection by coastal forests. Nature provides humanity with a wealth of benefits. It provides us with and supports human development and equality, economic value and security, and ultimately it increases our resilience to climate change. So The interactions between business and natural capital, let's just take a look at those. So on the previous slide, we mentioned natural capital, and this is a critical element with its interaction with businesses. And natural capital is defined as the stock of renewable and non-renewable resources like plants and animals and air and different types of non-living and living components that combine to yield a flow of benefits to people. And that definition comes from the Capitals Coalition's Natural Capital Protocol. So when we think about nature, we're looking at dependencies, impacts, risks and opportunities, and we know that every business impacts and depends on natural capital to some degree and will experience risks and or opportunities associated with those impacts and dependencies. So why should we care about business? Why should we care about nature loss? Why should we as businesses care about nature loss? Well, nature matters for business. It is the backbone of our national economy, of our global economy, and every business to some degree depends on nature. We now know that society, us, humanity, cannot survive, let alone thrive, without the essential functions that the natural world provides. So again, we reflect on the impacts, dependencies, risks and opportunities, which will really form the basis of your assessment and the foundation of your nature strategy. So nature is in crisis, we know that. Every business depends on nature. Half of the world's GDP, so that's over 58 trillion US dollars, is moderately or highly dependent on nature and its services, which means that businesses rely on nature for a variety of things, including food, energy and raw materials, but businesses are also impacting nature and contributing and driving nature loss. We now know that businesses are extracting resources from the planet at 1.75 times faster than nature is able to replenish them. So we also know that 90% of man-made pressures on nature are coming from 4 distinct sectors. So that's our systems, our food system, our energy system, and infrastructure and fashion, surprisingly. These pressures are manifest through those 5 key drivers of nature loss: the exploitation of species, pollution and waste, climate change, invasive non-native species, and land and sea use change. Nature is affecting our global economy already, nature loss. The global economy is already operating outside the safe zone for 6 of the 9 planetary boundaries. And if you're not familiar with the concept of planetary boundaries, I would really recommend that you visit StockholmResilience.org, which has a lot of information for the public around the 9 planetary boundaries, but also to watch the Netflix documentary, Breaking Boundaries, which will really explain it very well for you. So up to 577 billion in annual global crop production is at risk from pollinator loss, and ecosystem degradation could lead to global GDP losses of up to 2.7 trillion annually by 2030. So this creates physical risks to business, and these physical risks are the results of those direct dependencies on nature. So business that depends on freshwater resources, a lack of access to fresh water would completely disrupt economic activities and operations. And businesses that rely on pollinators for their crops could see their yields decline if pollinator populations continue to decline in the way that we're seeing. In recognition of these economic risks, businesses are now facing pressures to address their impacts and dependencies on nature. And these pressures are coming from several different sources. So we have that global agenda as the initial one. So that's the Global Biodiversity Framework, which was agreed in Montreal in COP15 in 2022. And 196 governments agreed that they would halt and reverse nature loss by 2030. This was a particularly historic moment because it was the first time that governments stated so explicitly what they expect from businesses on nature. So within the GBF, we have Target 15, and that explicitly calls for businesses it mandates for businesses to assess and disclose their impacts and dependencies on nature. So that basically means that we are now seeing that these targets are being translated into national biodiversity action plans and strategies. Now, if you were following the activity in COP16 in Cali, which finished up recently, you will see that a very low number of these 196 countries have actually put forward an updated national biodiversity strategic plan, which includes the global biodiversity targets within it. But Ireland was one of the countries that did. So I think only 20 of the 196 actually have updated their national plans at this point. The next source of pressure is regulatory pressure. So we're all very conscious of this Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, which requires companies now to disclose information on their nature and biodiversity impacts. And we also have the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, the CS3D, which expects companies to identify, prevent, mitigate, and end environmental and human harms within their direct operations and their value chains. Investors are also demanding change. So some of you might have already had questions from investors around plastics or freshwater pollution or other similar related things. And actually, really, we're seeing a lot of consumer and peer pressure emerging now as well, where we see studies now that are showing that 85% of consumers indicate that they've shifted their purchase behavior now to be more sustainable within the last 5 years. Now, there's loads and loads of guidance available for companies to act, so we'll touch on that a little bit later. But this means that, businesses are, under pressure to keep up with their peers, and that's a big part of it. In COP16 in Cali, we saw an announcement from TNFD that now they have more than 500 companies from over 46 countries who have agreed to become early adopters of the TNFD. And we're seeing that number increasing day on day. So all of these factors create transition risks for business. So the direct and indirect impacts of business activities on nature trigger these negative business consequences, such as losing customers or entire markets, costly legal action, and potentially adverse regulatory changes. But a nature positive transition also brings with it opportunities. So the World Economic Forum have estimated that transitions to nature positive in just 3 socioeconomic systems could deliver over $10 trillion of annual business opportunities and almost 400 million jobs by 2030. Beyond these opportunities to generate revenue, there's also an opportunity to reduce your costs to the tune of almost 700 billion annually. For example, through resource efficiency, by accessing new capital markets and investment opportunities, and through improved investor trust. And finally, behind every risk lies the opportunity to appropriately mitigate the risk. Nature positive transitions can reduce risk of non-compliance or unmet stakeholder expectations and lack of resilience. The next slide is really about the global goal for nature, and they ask for businesses to really rally behind the goal. And this is the goal that governments agreed to in COP15 to halt and reverse nature loss. And it's also kind of aligned with the nature positive movement, and it has 3 measurable temporal objectives built into it. So no net loss of nature from 2020, net positive by 2030, and a full recovery by 2050. So in summary, the objective is ultimately to have more nature in 5 years' time than there was in 2020. So, the clock is ticking. So to coordinate business efforts and to have a consistent approach to accelerate nature action, the organizations listed at the bottom of this slide have developed the ACT-D framework. And so this stands for Assess, Commit, Transform, and Disclose. The first phase of this process is assess. And of course, we have built our work streams around this particular methodology. So the first phase is assess. It's about measuring, valuing, and prioritizing your impacts and dependencies to ensure you're acting on the most important material ones. So you might want to use something like TNFD to help you with that assessment process. The next phase is called commit, and the commitment is really about setting transparent, time-bound, smart targets that'll put your company on the right track towards operating within planetary boundaries. And so the science-based targets have the science-based targets for nature guidance, technical guidance that is there to support companies in target setting. But action on nature is not just about measuring and setting targets. Ultimately, we're looking for businesses and companies to transform, and they need to contribute to systems transformation by avoiding and reducing negative impacts they're having on nature, mobilizing resources into restoring and regenerating, collaborating across landscapes and seascapes and river basins, shifting your business strategy, changing your business model, using your business voice for advocating for policy change, and embedding that nature strategy within your corporate governance. And lastly, disclosure. You need to be able to publicly report your material nature-related information throughout this journey. And that in some cases will be mandated, and that in some cases will be volunteering. So it's really important that more businesses volunteer this information, because it sets the bar higher and it allows you to continue to participate in those larger value chains, perhaps where bigger corporates within those value chains are required to report on activity within their value chain. So for anyone out there that is just beginning your journey, there are loads of resources out there to help you. So again, Business for Nature, World Economic Forum, WBCSD, they're all collaborating. And last year, they developed sector actions towards a nature positive future, which highlights 12 key industry sectors and what the key impacts and dependencies for each of those sectors are, and what your priority actions should be to contribute to a nature positive future. So they are really useful to help you to understand how and where your business interfaces with nature and where your key action areas might be. And I have it on good authority that there are more of these to be launched. So you can see there at the bottom, there's additional ones that were recently launched on buildings and infrastructure, and sorry, that they're the ones that are there, but there aren't other ones coming through on pharmaceuticals and a few other sectors as well. So watch the space. Now, if we know that there's a lot of guidance out there and people are sort of overwhelmed, but you can pick and choose bits and pieces of the different guidance to help you along your journey. And I suppose that's where the Nature Strategy Handbook comes in, because it's quite concise as a guidance document, and it pulls in elements of the things, the other 7 documents that you can see listed at the bottom. It brings in elements of those to help you progress against against the different phases of that process. So the Nature Strategy Handbook is the guidance document that we'll be referring to for our Nature Strategy Accelerator program, which we're due to start next year in January. So it's only really a couple of months away, which I'll go into in a little bit more detail, but these are the resources that we'll be using. So as you can see, it is the most up-to-date, the most developed resources that are there, but it's a way for us to kind of cut through the noise a little bit and distill the key parts of those pieces to actually use in a practical sense. So if we dive in a little bit to what this process looks like, so we're looking at assess here. So we're going to basically just look at the theory behind it first, and then we'll have a quick look at how someone in the business community has applied the assess process. So this is about measuring, valuing, and prioritizing your impacts. We're doing a materiality assessment at kind of high level to kind of prioritize your efforts. There's a measurement and evaluating phase where you look to see, what is the likelihood? It's like a risk analysis. What is the likelihood and impact of these actual impacts happening? Looking at risks and opportunities, and then aligning with climate and people. So aligning any climate or nature or people strategies that you have, so that everything is lined up and speaking to each other. So you can use resources like the TNFD's LEAP approach, the science-based targets technical guidance is useful, and the natural capital protocol also has interesting guidance on this. And sometimes it's about just having a quick review of each of those and seeing which of them kind of fits your business best, or your style of working, I guess, or perhaps your capacity or resources. So this is just a nice example of a materiality assessment that has been done by Kering. And for anyone who doesn't know Kering, they're a really big luxury brand, and they own companies like Gucci and Balenciaga and a lot of the high-end stuff that most of us can't afford. But they're really at the cutting edge of the biodiversity side of things. So you can see the way that they've laid out their materiality assessment. To a layperson, you can straight away see that the tier 4, where their raw materials are, is really where their largest impact is. And so that allows them to understand where should we be focusing our efforts. So they have used things like the Encore, the Encore tool, which you can find online, SBTN and TNFD to get to this point. So that's kind of an example of what, and again, materiality assessments can vary wildly in terms of how that information is presented. This is just an example of how one company has done it. The next part is the commit. phase. So this again, it's really leaning into the science-based targets. Now, the technical guidance is really technical, so it might not be possible for lay people coming in trying to kind of unpack that. It's quite technical, but there's a lot of support available from SBTN for anyone who wants to use the guidance. The commit part is really about defining what your nature strategy ambition is, what your nature ambition statement is going to be. So where do you want to go? So you'll be setting that statement based on the assessment of your impacts and dependencies. So all of that sort of feeds into the building of your strategy. And then using science or evidence to set targets and making sure that they're smart and that they're completely connected to your impacts and dependencies. So they're not just arbitrary targets that you're trying to do that are divorced from your activities, your direct operations or your value chain activities. Now, commit in practice. So this is an example of something that GSK produced, who are GlaxoSmithKline, a pharmaceutical company, and they use the TNFD to generate this, and they set targets that are broken down into those 4 focus areas, those 4 realms of nature, which we touched on at the beginning: freshwater, land, oceans, and atmosphere. And their land targets are correlating to their primary impacts and dependencies. And actually, one of their targets is also linked with the remuneration of their senior leaders. So that's a very interesting approach as well from GSK. And if you want to see any of these nature strategies in more detail, you can go to the website nowfornature.org into the strategy section, and I think there's about 26 different strategies that have been assessed by Business for Nature to meet minimum requirements. So not necessarily that they're being validated, but they're certainly being assessed to make for suitability. And you can see when you go on there, you can see there's quite a variety of organizations from different sectors and a variety of approaches as well, there's no wrong answers, I guess, at this stage while we're all still in this sort of learning phase. And then the transform piece is about contributing to systems transformation. So you're avoiding and reducing your negative impacts. You're mobilizing resources and finance towards restoration and regeneration, particularly if you're sitting in a tertiary sector. So if you're not in a high impact primary sector like agriculture, mining, extractives, energy, and you're sitting sort of in the services or retail end, you might find it quite difficult to figure out how exactly what you can be doing, what you should be prioritizing, or where your connection to nature is. So oftentimes I would say to anyone sitting in that section of the value chain is, you have the wherewithal, so the financial resources and to actually mobilize real money into nature restoration, because ultimately, those companies are benefiting from activities within the value chain, nature being underpinning the whole thing. The profit is sitting in a lot of those big corporates sitting in that tertiary part. So we need to be able to find a way of mobilizing that capital. Collaboration and partnership, at different levels of the ecosystem, shifting your business strategy, changing your model, becoming more resilient, becoming more responsible, becoming more sustainable, and also using your voice to change policy and get rid of policy barriers or planning barriers that might prevent you from doing the right thing, and ultimately embedding that strategy within your corporate governance. So this is an example there from Iberdrola, who are an energy company, and they have applied the mitigation hierarchy in their strategy to set out their transformative actions. So this is alongside broader value chain actions and governance actions. So again, if you want more detail on that, you can go to the nowfornature.org campaign website. Using your business voice to advocate is really important. It's a really key element of the transform phase is to try and create an enabling policy environment for business so that you can do the right thing. And we have to be able to give courage and comfort to policymakers that leading businesses fully support ambitious policies. And we've seen that again with COP16, an unprecedented number of businesses arriving and supporting COP16 and being present there to advocate for ambitious policy around nature and regulation, and reiterating the critical role that business and finance plays in achieving the global biodiversity targets and the 2050 goals. So this can go a long way, to convincing governments to implement well-designed policies and mandatory requirements that can in turn accelerate action and enable companies to deliver on their own strategies. So that kind of creates a positive feedback loop between business and policymakers. So it's really important to engage at that level. Again, reflecting to Business for Nature, who, by the way, have supplied us with a lot of the slides today, and it's really about aligning messaging across different jurisdictions. So they've given us some nice slides to explain the key sort of concepts, to ensure that we have the most up-to-date information and everybody's aligned in the messaging that we're sending out there through the different global organizations. So they are great in terms of the advocacy side of things, and they have a responsible policy engagement document which outlines why and how to advocate for nature using these key 5 steps which are listed there. So committing to supporting ambitious policy, aligning trade associations, allocating spending, speaking out and disclosing your advocacy activity or lobbying, I guess, which you have to do anyway here in Ireland. So you can also refer to Business for Nature's policy recommendations, which were released in May, that will help you to explore what policies you can ask governments to adopt. And there are loads of opportunities to speak out through our various different summits and conferences that happen here in Ireland on an annual basis. We're probably all kind of sick of them, there's so many. But there's lots of opportunities to speak out and to advocate for better quality policy and more ambitious policy. And then the last bit is disclose. So, I think it's really important that when you create a strategy, you get some independent validation. And I guess the platform is really well positioned to deliver on independent validation and review any sustainability, or I suppose specifically nature strategies that you're working on. Your nature strategy might be part of your sustainability strategy. And I guess it's a good point to mention that the nature positive approach is not a tangential track. It's not an additional thing for you to do. It's a core path to help your organization to deliver on climate and nature goals and people, because they're all interconnected. But it's really important that you build a sustainability strategy that has nature at its core. The disclosing part is also about aligning with major reporting standards. If you're subject to CSRD, go straight for the ESRS standards. If you're voluntarily reporting, I would highly recommend the suite of standards from GRI, that's the Global Reporting Initiative. You can also, there's also reporting and disclosure guidance from CDP. I think it's more important to decide that at the very beginning of your journey so that you're not trying to align towards the end. So if you set things up in alignment at the beginning, then I guess there'll be less alignment work for you to do at the end. And just an extra point to note that CDP and GRI and ESRS are all sort of interoperable. So there's a lot of similarities between those 3 methods of reporting. So, there's no one right or wrong one. You can choose whichever one suits your organization. Perhaps you're already engaged with CDP or you're already using GRI. So it just depends on your own individual situation. So I'm just going to briefly talk about our program, which we're launching next year. We'll continue to offer the free training webinars on the Discovery Track. There's no obligation for businesses to go any further than that. If you just want to learn more about biodiversity and how it applies to your business and you want to go the journey alone, or you could join some friends and go together in community. So this is the 4-track training program, and it is designed to support Irish businesses to help you create a credible strategy and implement that strategy. We want to help you to integrate nature into decision-making in the same way that health and safety is integrated into decision-making, in the same way that quality is integrated. Sustainability and nature have to be mainstreamed throughout the whole organization. We want to help you build a more resilient business model. And if you're a consultancy, we want to help you to help your clients to do that. Assisting companies with compliance with CSRD or other regulations you might be subjected to, and ultimately delivering broader systemic value to people and planet. That's what we're all trying to do with sustainability. So the 4 tracks I'll go through briefly. So this is the one that you're on, the Discovery Track, and maybe there's some people in the audience that haven't yet registered, and please do. There's no obligation to continue through the other tracks. We encourage you to, of course, but that is completely up to your own organization. And it's always good to be part of the Discovery Track because you'll be kept up to date in terms of what's happening. It's for any and all businesses that want to take action for nature, but you're just not really too sure what to do or where to start. So we will provide you with that guidance on how to get started. We'll keep you up to date on the latest information coming through and the events that are happening. You'll get at least 3 training webinars per year, and we will vary the content, and hopefully there'll be, we're hoping that next year we'll deliver one on Nature is Your Business series. So that's kind of planned for 2025. We'll curate all the resources and keep them updated for you, so you don't have to hunt around online to find them. So they're there in a repository for you. And ultimately, being part of this means that you're part of a connected community of other organizations that want to do better. It'll help you to improve your knowledge on biodiversity, improve your knowledge on how your business is connected to all of this, and understand what your next steps are going to be on your own journey to nature positive. And everybody's journey is going to be different. It's going to depend on where you're sitting in the value chain. Then when you're ready and you feel like the time is right for action, the action track is there. So there are fees associated with it, but the fees are aligned with the green grants that are available from Enterprise Ireland, from your local enterprise office, from Údarás and Heron, and I think the IDA also have some green grants that will support this work. And this is for you if you're ready to start that journey and make that commitment, and you want to address the impacts that your business has on nature, and you're ready to undertake that double materiality assessment. So you obviously will get all the discovery track stuff, but also you'll get online assessment focused workshops 3 times a year and 3 consultation sessions with the team here on the platform focused on your business context, so focus on challenges that you're experiencing in your own business. So this, being part of this particular community, will help you assess your impacts and dependencies on nature. It'll help you understand more what the risks are, and it'll ultimately guide you through the process of completing that double materiality assessment. And this really is about capacity building. Like, we're not there to do the work for you. We want to build the internal capacity in Irish business so that you can do it and maintain it and keep it going and reiterate it yourself. And consultancies have a supporting role to play, but it's important that when a consultant leaves your business that they don't take that knowledge and know-how and capacity with them. So we have a responsibility as businesses to build our own knowledge and capacity in this area, because it's the future. And so if you want to join the action track, you're in good company. These are the businesses that are currently in the action track with us, and we're delighted to have them. So if you'd like to get involved, these are the company of businesses that you'll be with in this community. And our next, or I guess our first action workshop, is happening at the end of this month. So you're more than welcome, of course, to join us and the other organizations there. Then when you've completed your double materiality assessment and you're ready to define what your nature ambition statement is going to look like, and you're ready to start putting together nature targets, then the strategy track is where it's at. So we will help you to align your climate and nature and people goals, and ultimately help you to develop a credible nature strategy. You'll get all of the things, all the same kind of support you get in the action track. You can actually move between the tracks depending on where you feel most comfortable or what makes the most sense for you at the time. This is an iterative process, so you get to track 4 and then you actually should be going back to the action track to redo your materiality assessment, because it will change. The material topics will change over time. So the final track then is the evolution track, and that's when you have your strategy, and we will support you in creating an implementation plan, figure out ways to measure and monitor and evaluate your actions to make sure that they're fit for purpose and they're delivering on what you want them to deliver on. So again, we're offering those workshops, community workshops, and we do migrate from online to in-person as we go through the different tracks, because in-person is just so great in terms of building relationships, the networking piece, and just getting more. It's a lot more productive than spending a couple of hours online. So we do try and have in-person sessions when we can, and then you have your one-on-one sessions, of course, with the team as well. So I'm just going to give you a quick little flavor of the upcoming events. So on the 27th of November, we're doing our action track workshop, which we're introducing those businesses to the materiality assessment process. And then in January, we have our strategy track workshop. So that's about setting nature ambition. So we'll be working with our pilot organization. So that's Bus Éireann, An Post, ESB, Bank of Ireland, Glenveagh Properties, Cairn Homes and SAP Landscapes, who are in that strategy track with us. A great community, almost described as therapy sometimes, because this stuff is hard, and sometimes it's great to have other businesses, you know, in a pre-competitive setting where you can just soundboard and see how other people faced other challenges and solved things, and other learnings, I guess. And the next Discovery webinar is scheduled for the end of February. And we'll be doing part 1 of the Nature is Your Business series. So hidden nature impacts. Where might nature impacts be sitting in your business model, in your direct operation? So we'll address that in February, and hopefully you'll be along there with us. So the last slide there is just a research piece. You might have seen this in the bumper video if you were here at the beginning of the hour. We're doing this piece of research as part of an objective within the National Biodiversity Action Plan. We were asked by government to do an assessment of the biodiversity skills that businesses need, and I guess where the gaps are, with a view to reporting this back to government and having that as part of a decision-making tool for them in terms of how and where to mobilise resources to support businesses, particularly when it comes to biodiversity. So we'd really appreciate if you would just fill out that survey. It'll give you a really good understanding of where you're at as well, because we've outlined all the different things we think you should know. So you know, it's absolutely great if you don't know them, because it really gives us a lot of it lends a lot of weight to the results, because we can then go back to government and say there are big gaps here that need a lot of support. So that is the final slide, and I'll leave it up there for a brief moment so that we can just so you can get a chance to scan that QR code. I was in an in-person session there earlier this year, and I just made everyone take their phone out, which was kind of funny at the time, but we got a lot of responses, which was nice. So anyway, that is Sinead. I'll stop there.